Welcome back to the I Just Love Footy YouTube channel. Today I want to dig into an AFL ladder prediction on the eve of the AFL season, which starts in roughly 2 weeks, with a few practice matches upcoming for all teams, so I wanted to get in while I could. Now we'll split this video into 2 segments, starting with the bottom 10, and my 18th pick for the season is going to be the West Coast Eagles. I am intrigued with how Harley Reid will go in his first season. Being a bigger body coming out of the draft, usually they do take a little bit longer to get going. So I think that might skew how they go this season, depending on how quickly he adapts to the AFL game versus the bigger bodies in the midfield. We're seeing a similar trend as we have in the last few seasons. Injuries to their team may derail their season before it's already started. And lastly, what does Adam Simpson change from a game plan standpoint? And do they develop a sense of standard and avoid those blowout losses? I'm enthralled with how North Melbourne will go, although I do have them sitting at 17th place this season. I think, again, quite a young team. What's going to happen with their backline? You know, they're depending on players like Aiden Core. They've got Charlie Comben, who's just coming back from a leg fracture from last season. Losing a bit from their spine in Ben Mackay, I think that will play a significant impact in how their season goes. And I want to see their second pick in Colby Mikatra, I think it is. He's said to, take on the game from the very get-go. So I'm wondering how he's going to go. Will he take the Rising Star honours in his maiden season? I think we can expect more of the same from Nick Larkey. We're going to need more from Cam Zurhaar and Jaden Stevenson to support him. I think Zach Fisher is going to be a great acquisition from Carlton going into the forward line. I'm not sure what the split is looking like as far as mid to forward ratio for Zach. And what does Callum Coleman-Jones bring for the North Melbourne Football Club? Is he going to be an AFL player supporting Nick Larkey? We'll find out. But for those reasons and those moving variables, I have them sitting at 17th. 16th place. Now this was a tough one because I'm going to go Hawthorn Football Club. If you asked me a few weeks ago, I would have said I have them knocking on the door of the top 8. But with recent injuries to CJ in the back line, James Blank in the back line with an ACL, CJ a hamstring. We've got Will Day, probably their second best midfielder behind Jai Newcomb, out with ongoing foot issues. We've got Dylan Moore in the forward line, who is an all-Australian caliber small forward. And then we also recently had, we had Granger Barras, who is a key position player. I think the burden of trying to carry that load early on in the season is going to impact where Hawthorn sit halfway through the year. And for that reason, I have them sitting at 16th. The next two, I've gone with a slight bias against certain game plans. I've got St Kilda sitting at 15th just because of how boring they play. I don't think their list screams out anything amazing to me. I believe they had a chip on their shoulder more last season to prove to their supporting fan base that they are better than what they have been in the last couple seasons before last year. Whereas now they've sort of, proved a point. I don't know where the rugged and dogged mentality will come from this season. I feel like it's a quite unsustainable way to go about things, along with the boringly slow game plan that they work with under Ross Lyon. I do think they have a pretty decent backline with Dougal Howard and All-Australian Callum Wilkie, and then you've got Max King up front, who is, we're still not too sure about. He's supposed to be a generational player. Let's see that this season. Let's see him kick straight as well. Liam Henry and Paddy Dow. Liam Henry was from Fremantle. He's a genuine bona fide winger who can play in tandem with Bradley Hill on the opposing wings. And then Paddy Dow was starved of opportunities at Carlton, who actually did quite well at the back end of last season. If those moving parts can all click together, then maybe they find themselves in a better position than I do have them, and that's 15. Sliding right into the 14th position will be the Fremantle Dockers. For me, their game style is just as boring as what St Kilda brought to us last season, so for that reason, I want them lower towards the bottom portion of the ladder. They're probably going to need to do a lot better with their ruck dominance with Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson in that squad. I don't think they were a great clearance team. I think they broke even most games. So that's, putting more onus on those tap positions and the midfield, obviously gelling together with Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson. A particularly young forward line with Josh Tracy, who is relatively unproven, and Jai Miss, who showed a promising signs last season, along with the injuries to Nat Fyfe and Matt Taberner in that forward line. I feel like that might be a shortcoming for them this season. In the 13th slot, I've got the Essendon Bombers. I think with the new acquisitions in Ben Mackay, Todd Goldstein, Jade Gresham, and we also have Dersma from Port Adelaide, if they can all get ticks, relatively speaking, this season, I think they could climb higher. But I think there's just too many moving factors right now, along with the young key tall department. You have players like Zach Reed, who's had injury problems, Nick Cox, injury problems. Harrison Jones was in and out last season from memory, and also Nate Caddy, who was fresh out of the 2023 draft. So with those factors, I think they're going to sit in the middle to the bottom portion of the table in 2024. They are also probably missing a big body in the midfield. Will Setterfield can be that guy, but I think moving forward they're going to need somebody a little bit more talented than Will Setterfield, and I say that as respectfully as possible. In 12th position, I have Geelong sitting there. Old age, I guess, is the easy fallback when it comes to talking about Geelong. I think, having a look at their list, they had 11 players over the age of 30 who could arguably all be in their best 22 quite easily. So just that factor alone is going to help me make my decision a little bit easier and have them falling outside of the 8th in 12th position. Intertwined with the old age, you have their midfield, which doesn't run extremely deep. You got Cam Guthrie and Paddy Dangerfield, who had their own injury woes last season. It's going to be up to Max Holmes and Tanner Bruin to take it, not to the next level, but the level after that if they really want to compete. In 11th place, I have the Richmond Tigers. Now, I'm quite optimistic about their season, although there are a lot of youngsters they're going to depend on this season in Thompson Dow, Josh Gipkiss, and Jack Ross. And when you typically have to rely on a batch of youngsters, there is going to be inconsistencies throughout the season. I think Shai Bolton will take his game to the next level. Noah Bolter is going to be integral to the team playing forward. He is an elite intercept marker going back, but he also shows really good signs in the forward line, and he needs to help out Tom Lynch with the retirement of Jack Riewoldt. In 10th position, I have the Gold Coast Suns, who I am also quite optimistic about and wouldn't be surprised if they make the top 8. I think their defense is absolutely ready for the challenge. They've got Sam Collins, Will Powell, a great interceptor, Ben Long, an amazing one-on-one player, and Charlie Ballard, who is an elite intercept mark in his own right. The question marks aren't so much about the players for the Gold Coast. I mean, sure, you got Ben King and Jack Lukosius. What are they going to do? Can Rao take his game to the next level? Where does Flanders and Humphrey stand amongst all of this? But ultimately, it's going to come down to what's going on up here. And that's why they're bringing in a man like Damien Hardwick, who has been through a similar process with Richmond, where they were losers for quite some time, and then they the club made a statement: 3 premierships in 10 years, and look what happened. They all laughed when they said the statement, but it sets a precedent, and that's what's happening at Gold Coast, and that will ultimately decide whether they're going to be a team who is feared and people hate going to Gold Coast to verse them, or it's going to be more of the same. The Gold Coast players are just going to enjoy the weather up in sunny Gold Coast and sit down at the beach. And if they lose close games, oh well, we need to see more than that this season under Damien Hardwick. Finally, in 9th position, I'm going to go with Sydney Swans, another gutsy prediction. But my reasoning behind that is they haven't been the same since they lost Paddy McCartan in the back line. I don't think there's much of a supporting cast for Tom McCartan. He is susceptible to concussions. Now, I'm not preying on that, but we have to be mindful that this is a reality. Dan Rampy had his injury concerns last season. Outside of that, I don't think players like Lewis Melican and Aaron Francis meet the calibers that are needed in the defence to take your team and propel them into the top 4 or the top 8 alone. Their forward line isn't going to be able to have the same sort of fear that they imposed on sides in recent years. Buddy Franklin just had that energy and aura, and now that he's not there, I think that's going to be missed in the team, an intangible aura there. You have Logan McDonald, who is a very promising key forward, and Joel Amadi and Hayden McLean, but I think they're going to take some time to get the ball rolling, and that's why I have them falling just outside the 8 this season. While these are my own personal predictions for the AFL ladder in 2024, I did do a video on AFL clubs' pass marks for their own seasons and what they think their pass marks are internally. So I'm going to share that here with you while you guys wait for the top 8 video. So in the meanwhile, have a look at that video and you'll see the top 8 video come around very shortly. Thank you. Bye.